It's January in Tehran. Reza is wearing his coat indoors. Not a sweater. A coat. The gas pressure in his building dropped 3 days ago. The radiators are lukewarm. His kid's school moved online because the school couldn't heat the classrooms. And on state television, a government minister is asking him, politely, to turn his thermostat down 2 more degrees. Now here's the part that doesn't make sense. Reza is standing on top of 34 trillion cubic meters of natural gas, the second largest reserve on Earth. Only Russia has more. He is cold, and he is standing on more gas than almost anybody alive. This is not a story about a poor country. Iran is not poor. Iran is one of the richest countries on the planet, and its people live on about $285 a month. Here's what you don't know. Those 2 facts aren't a contradiction. One of them causes the other. Start with the wealth, because almost everyone gets this part wrong. Measured by purchasing power, Iran's economy is the 23rd largest in the world, $2.18 trillion. That is bigger than Poland, bigger than the Netherlands, bigger than Switzerland and Sweden put together. 93 million people. This is not a small country. Under the ground, the numbers get absurd. The International Monetary Fund once put Iran's underground hydrocarbons at roughly $10 trillion in oil, plus another $3.5 to $4.5 trillion in gas. Call it $14 trillion. And that estimate was made with oil at $75 a barrel. So it's a conservative figure, not an inflated one. Above the ground, it isn't just holes and pipelines either. Iran is the 10th largest steel producer on Earth. It builds around 1.1 million cars a year. The biggest auto industry in the Middle East, 17th in the world. It has world-class reserves of zinc, copper, iron ore, and bauxite, and full smelting and refining chains to go with them. Every ingredient of a wealthy country is sitting right there. Now the other number. GDP per person, in actual dollars, $3,415 a year. That's $285 a month. And that's the average. The real minimum wage, converted at the rate Iranians actually trade at, is lower still. Last year, that number fell 20%. 14 trillion under the floor. $285 in the pocket. So where does it go? Here's the mechanism. It's simpler than you'd think. Iran doesn't sell most of its energy. It gives it away. A liter of gasoline in Iran costs 15,000 rials for your first 60 liters of the month. The world average price, converted into the same currency, is about 770,000. Read that again. Iranians pay roughly 1/50th of the world price for fuel, around 2.5 cents a liter. Natural gas at home is close to free. Electricity is close to free. That is not a rounding error in the national budget. That is the national budget. Iran's energy subsidies run about $75 to $80 billion a year. That's roughly 1/5 of the entire economy. It is about 2.5 times everything the government spends on everything else. Schools, hospitals, roads, salaries, the military, all of it combined. Iran gives away more value and cheap energy each year than it collects and spends in its entire budget. And here's the thing about a price of zero. When something is free, people don't use a little less of it. They use all of it. Iranian gas and electricity consumption has set a new record almost every year for a decade. Iran now burns gas like a country 3 times its size, so the arithmetic breaks. In winter, Iran runs about 250 million cubic meters a day short of gas. In summer, 14,000 megawatts short of electricity. And when the country runs short, it doesn't cut off households. It cuts off factories. Steel plants stop. Cement plants cut output in half. Iran, Khodro, and Saipa, the 2 car giants, lose entire days of production. Cold storage in the northern provinces fails, and the food inside spoils. In one summer alone, more than 80,000 industrial workers were sent home without pay. The blackouts cost Iranian industry at least $8 billion a year. Then there's the leak. When fuel inside your borders costs 1/50th of what it costs outside them, fuel does what water does. It flows downhill. Somewhere between 20 and 35 million liters of gasoline are smuggled out of Iran every single day. That is more than a fifth of everything the country consumes. A fifth of the subsidy never reaches an Iranian at all. Now here's the concept I want you to keep, because it's the whole video. You can't save a discount. An Iranian family is genuinely receiving something real. Cheap fuel, cheap power, cheap bread. Adjusted for what things actually cost inside the country, it's worth a lot. And that's exactly why the purchasing power figure is $21,888, while the dollar figure is $3,415. That 6-to-1 gap is the subsidy, made visible. But a discount is not income. You can't bank a discount. You can't invest it. You can't pass it to your children, or turn it into a house, or carry it across a border. The second you stop consuming, it's gone. A salary compounds. A discount evaporates. Iran pays its people in gasoline, and gasoline can only be burned. If you want to know exactly what that costs, you don't need a model. There's a control group. 200 kilometers off Iran's southern coast lies the largest natural gas field ever discovered. Iran calls its half South Pars. Qatar calls its half the North Dome. Same geology, same gas. One field, split by a line on a map. Qatar sold its half. It brought in foreign engineering, built liquefaction terminals, signed 20-year supply contracts with Japan, Korea, India, and Europe, and became the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas on the planet. Qatari income per person, around $73,000 a year. Iranian income per person, $3,415. 20 times the difference. Same rock. Now let me steelman the other side, because that comparison is unfair in one obvious way. Qatar has 3 million people, and more than 80% of them are foreign workers. Iran has 93 million. Divide any resource by 93 million, and it shrinks fast. Fair enough. But that's not what did it. What did it is that Qatar built machinery to sell gas, and Iran built machinery to consume it. South Pars alone needs about 20 gas compression platforms just to stop its output from falling. Roughly $20 billion of equipment that Iran cannot buy and struggles to build. Qatar's side has the compressors. Iran's side loses pressure every year. The field isn't the difference. The plumbing is. Now the obvious question. Everybody in Tehran can do this math. Iranian economists have been writing it in Iranian newspapers for 30 years. So why doesn't Iran simply raise the price of fuel? They tried. Once. And we know exactly what happened. November 15th, 2019. Overnight, with no warning, the government announced fuel price increases of 50 to 300%. Within hours, there were protests in more than 100 cities. Within a day, the government shut down the internet for the entire country. Near total, from the 15th to the 19th. Amnesty International later documented at least 304 people killed. Other counts run considerably higher. Nobody has ever been held accountable. 5 days later, the internet came back on. And a lesson was learned. Just not the one you'd hope for. Cheap fuel in Iran is not an economic policy that got out of hand. It's a payment. It is the price of consent, handed over every day at every pump to 93 million people. And the moment the state tried to stop paying it, it found out precisely how much it needed to. There's a second layer. It's uglier. Ask who would fund a reform. In a normal country, you raise fuel prices and you tax the industries that got fat on cheap energy. Iran can't do that. An enormous share of the Iranian economy sits inside the banyads, foundations that are officially charitable, and inside the business empire of the Revolutionary Guard. The United States Treasury has stated that these entities together control more than half of Iran's economy. They are tax-exempt. They don't publish budgets. They report to the supreme leader, not to parliament. And they didn't suffer from the crisis. They fed on it. When Shell and Total walked out of Iran's energy sector under sanctions, contracts to develop phases of South Pars went to subsidiaries of Qatam Al-Anbiya, the Guard's engineering arm, awarded with no bidding. So the machine looks like this. The people are paid in fuel they cannot save. The state buys quiet it cannot afford. And the half of the economy that could actually pay for a fix doesn't pay tax. That isn't a broken system. That is a working system, doing exactly what it was built to do. Now, the part most videos on this topic skip entirely. Sanctions are real. This is not a story where Iran did all of it to itself. Iran cannot buy the $20 billion of compression equipment South Pars needs because nobody is allowed to sell it. Its largest steelmaker exports through third-party traders because end buyers are afraid of being blacklisted. It's locked out of the international payments system. Its refineries and power plants run on equipment decades past replacement. Add the direct war damage of recent years, and the picture gets worse again. Without sanctions, Iran would be meaningfully richer. That's true, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But it does not explain this. The subsidy system was built during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s and simply never dismantled, decades before the harshest sanctions existed. And Qatar was blockaded by its own neighbors from 2017 to 2021, and its income per person barely moved because it had built something that earned rather than something that burned. Sanctions explain Iran's ceiling. They don't explain its floor. So go back to Reza. In his coat. In his apartment. In January. He is not a poor man in a poor country. He is a man standing on $14 trillion, holding a card that lets him buy gasoline at 2 cents a liter in a building with no heat. He's rich. He just can't withdraw any of it. And before you file this one under, well, that's Iran. Go and check your own life for the same shape. Anytime a government hands you something for less than it costs to produce, you are not being made wealthier. You are being paid in something you cannot save by somebody who will eventually have to stop. The bill always arrives. It just doesn't always arrive as a bill. Subscribe, because next time we're taking the other half of that gas field and the country that got it right.